Hello and welcome to the Charles River Conservancy Parkland Show. My name is Renata von Schorner. I'm the founder and president of the Charles River Conservancy, and we're going to have a big change coming up at the Charles River Conservancy because we have a new executive director, and that is Laura. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you.
Laura Jasinski is the new executive director, which is very exciting. We had a search and found the perfect candidate, and here she is next to me.
Thank you.
So I thought it would be wonderful to do a show together and give a bit of a background about Laura and her work and how her work is relevant to what we do along the Charles River. But as always, we always start with the picture of the Charles River parklands, and Laura has that now sitting in her office, these parklands, and wonderful parklands. Much of them are in Cambridge. And as you know, we have about 2,000 volunteers a year. In East Cambridge is the skate park that many of you have seen and have heard about, and we're working on a swim park. And so I'm going to take you to a part of where Laura came from. Laura came from the Rose Kennedy Greenway Conservancy.
That's
via
right.
The trustees, but you're going to talk about the Rose Kennedy Greenway Conservancy. And tell us a little bit, before we go to your the job there, tell us a bit about your education.
Sure. So before I even started at the Rose Kennedy Greenway, I was working in an architecture firm, William Ron Associates, and I was working in the model shop building different scale models of projects they were working on. I started that right after graduating from Tufts University, and did that for about 3 years before I realized I was really more interested in the spaces in between the buildings than the buildings themselves. So I took a great opportunity to go work for Linda Jonash at the Rose Kennedy Greenway Conservancy and started doing that work. And while I was there, I actually went back to Tufts again to get my master's at the UEP program, which stands for Urban Environmental Policy and Planning.
So let's move kind of from the Charles River parklands. You recognize we are in a new basin here, and we do see the beginning of the Rose Kennedy Greenway. The bridge in the middle is the Museum of Science Bridge, and the next bundle of bridges is the Zaken Bridge and the Livered Connector, and on the other side of that bridge is where the Rose Kennedy Greenway starts, with the Portal Park. So let's jump in to the Rose Kennedy Greenway here.
Right, so that's looking at the center of the Rose Kennedy Greenway, and for a bit of background, you may know the Greenway as part of the Big Dig, which is more formally called the Central Artery Project. This is when Boston and the Mass Highway Department, now Mass Department of Transportation, decided to take the elevated highway that was running through the center of its downtown and financial district and blocking the city off from the harbor and sink it underground. And so they did that. It was a very long, complicated project known as one of the most complex city building projects, I think, in the country.
The Big Dig.
The Big Dig.
Yeah.
And so essentially the Rose Kennedy Greenway is a 1.5 mile long roof deck with different depths along the way from the tunnel height to the top of the park. And so when they built this new park, they had to figure out who was going to take care of it. So the Rose Kennedy Greenway Conservancy was formed to fundraise for the park, to improve it, and to program it, and to do the maintenance and horticulture functions of the park.
But the owner of that space is still Mass DOT?
That's right, because the Greenway is still the roof of the highway tunnel, so it is still the property of DOT, but the Greenway Conservancy works in partnership with them and with some state funding from them to maintain and program the park.
Yeah. And as you see, there are some lovely green spaces, but in between are the crossroads, and so it's kind of broken up into different areas. So you're going to tell us about an area which is, what are the side streets of the area we're talking about near the Marriott Hotel, kind of on the right-hand side of the Greenway.
Right, and so that's right across, right in between Christopher Columbus Park, which is off to the right there, that kind of big section of green. And then the other side of that is Faneuil Hall Marketplace,
Yeah.
near the Marriott, and that street there is right where Commercial kind of takes a right and goes by towards the harbor and the north end.
Yeah.
And so this is a section of the parks that we call the Wharf District Parks.
Yeah, and it's also where a lot of people who visit Faneuil Hall would cross the Greenway to go to the harbor.
That's right.
Yeah, so it's a very busy intersection. So tell us of how did the Greenway Conservancy go about determining what they want to see there and how they implemented their plan?
Sure. So shortly after I started working for the Conservancy in 2010, we were working with a really fabulous donor, and she wanted to do something special for the children of Boston. So we took a walk with her and showed her different ideas and different parks, and shared some ideas. And she really loved the idea of building a carousel for the children of Boston. So she wanted to support that and was very adamant that we go directly to the experts and talk with the children. So I started probably 2 months before that, and they came to me and said, Laura, we need you to go and talk to the children and find out what kind of carousel characters they want to ride, because we were looking to build not just a carousel with horses, but a unique one that had, different types of animals that you could ride on. So I used my model building skills, having just left an architecture firm, and went into 4 different public schools in Boston, in different neighborhoods, in the North End, in Back Bay, in Dorchester, and in South Boston.
So are these also the neighborhoods where the children who are likely to use it might be coming from?
Right, and we wanted to get a good cross-section of Boston and ask everybody, because we wanted this to be every child in Boston's carousel. So we tried to go work in different areas of the city in different neighborhoods. So I made some model carousels out of foam core and brought them to these classrooms of 2nd and 3rd graders and asked them to take a index card and draw on the back what they wanted to see on their carousel. And I quickly realized I also needed to ask them to write what their drawing was on the back, because some of them were a little hard to decipher.
Yeah.
So each of the classrooms had a collection of drawings, and then we used popsicle sticks to kind of plant them into the carousel, and all of the children signed the canopy, and they each had their own model carousel. And then we took these ideas, and the artist we were working with, a fantastic talented man named Jeff Briggs, who's actually based out of Newburyport, north of the city, took all these drawings and collected them and took inspiration from them and came up with a set of characters and carousel designs from his history as a carousel artist for decades.
So has built other carousels.
He used to work for the kind of #1 carousel manufacturer in the country. So he took all of these drawings and came up with a great cross-section of characters from the land, air, and sea of Boston and the Shawmut Peninsula, which is
So there are no fire engines, there are
There's not.
only animals.
We did get a suggestion that David Ortiz should be one of the characters, but we have a barn owl, there's a falcon, there's actually a sea serpent, but the sea serpent itself was based on an oarfish. And the oarfish was a fish that you used to see in the Boston Harbor that people confused with a sea serpent. They thought it was a monster because it would only surface right before it died. So it was a very kind of scary experience. So even that was based on real anatomy of Boston.
Now, did you or the Conservancy write up the story of all the animals? Is there something written about that?
Right now they're actually working on a coloring book of all of the carousel characters, working again with Jeff and his illustrations.
Yeah.
And if you go to the ticket booth at the carousel and you look on the side, you can see some of the original drawings that that inspired the characters that are there.
Because I'm sure the children who worked on those drawings
Right.
are very happy to see that implemented.
That's right. We it actually took us probably a year or two from the time that we went into the elementary schools until we built some of the first characters. It was a year or two, but we brought those same students back, as many of them as we could track down, to be the first riders of the carousel.
Yeah.
And they were so excited.
Because you have to be able to ride those animals. It's
Right.
not enough to be a depiction of an animal, but it needs to be rideable.
That's right.
Yeah. So you have some pictures here.
Right.
Is that so it's accessible also, the carousel?
That's right, and our approach to accessibility with the carousel, again, we wanted this to be something that everybody could use, no matter your age or your ability. So we worked with a group called the Institute for Human-Centered Design, and Valerie Fletcher is our executive director, to think about how we could design the site and the carousel itself to be very welcoming, and not only for those with using mobility devices, but those that might have cognitive or sensory disabilities.
Yeah.
So the lights on the carousel are designed to be adjusted to people's comfort level. The carousel characters that are of the land, the fox and the squirrel, they're designed to have extra curves and extra tactile nature to them. So people that are have sensory issues can really feel them and be connected to them. We also designed a ramp into the carousel, which allows people using mobility devices to roll on and then actually kind of be encompassed in one of the carousel characters. You kind of sit next to the harbor seal when you need to sit in a wheelchair or something like that. So we worked really closely with the Institute for Human-Centered Design to figure out how to make all these experiences very welcoming and not just about accessibility, but about the experience. So making sure if you're waiting in line and you need to use the ramp, you're waiting in line with the same people that are using the regular gate.
And probably not too scary. So
right.
So
right.
Yeah, and so.
And we also, if you go to this, we also worked to make sure that the landscape was accessible and also sustainable. So
who was the landscape architect for that?
Reed Hildebrand was the landscape architect here. They also did the Harbor Islands Pavilion, which is just south of the carousel. So we used the same team that worked on that, Reed Hildebrand and Util architects. Mm-hmm. And they designed this really incredible paving platform where you have some sections of the paving that are really tight next to each other. There's no joint necessarily, so they provide a really smooth surface so that if you're pushing a wheelchair or a stroller, you have a really smooth experience. And those kind of smooth paths get you to the ticket booth, and they get you to the entry gate, and they get you around the site and to the tables. But then everywhere else they've used an open joint paver, so there's a 1/4 of an inch between each paving unit, which allows rainwater to infiltrate to get to feed those trees. Everybody wants happy trees.
So they're paths and they are kind of in between areas.
That's right. And so also what you can't see here is those pavers are sitting on top of one giant soil bed. So instead of planting trees in individual pits, they wanted to get the trees to as much soil and have the roots be able to grow as far as they could. So all of those pavers are somewhat floating on top of one large soil bed, which is better for the trees.
Wonderful. So they kind of were thinking of making that easy to maintain and sustainable environment.
Right, and it's hard in an urban condition. And we also looked a lot to European carousels that are often set in groves of trees. As the design.
Yeah. Great. And here is another picture. That's a close-up, so you see, so people can sit nearby.
You can see the skunk there. You can see some of the butterfly wings. But overall, this was just an incredibly successful project for the Conservancy. It was one of the first, if not the first, kind of big improvement projects, a big capital project that they had to raise a lot of money for and change the park. And it also has a really great benefit in that you pay for a ticket to ride the carousel, which is pretty reasonable. It was about $3, and that's try to keep that as low as possible. But then a lot of that money also goes back to the Greenway Conservancy and goes back into maintaining the park and programming the park for the public.
Yeah, it's a very joyful thing. I mean, because a carousel has a bit of like a circus. It has this feeling of celebration.
I still try to go back and ride it at least once a season, and usually more.
Yeah, and I mean, I also see that they invite other grown-ups like you to come. It's not just for children.
Oh, definitely not.
I think it's something that grown-ups like as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, particularly after a beer, I guess.
Yeah.
So let's go back to the plan because you want to tell us about another project you worked on.
Yeah, so after building the carousel, I worked on some of the public art installations that were going into the greenway. The Conservancy did a strategic plan to figure out how can we do public art in the parks, and they had several public meetings and took a lot of feedback. And after a 2-year planning process, they decided that all of the art on the greenway should be two things. It should be contemporary art, and it should also be temporary. And the thinking behind that was it allows more conversations to happen. If you like the art, that's great, but sorry, it's going to go away at some point. And if you don't like the art, well, don't worry, it's going to go away at some point. So it keeps a rotation, it keeps fresh ideas, and it allows for new partnerships with different institutions and different artists.
And are there institutions that are regularly part of that process?
There is a mural wall in Dewey Square that probably people are familiar with. It's a very large mural, and that has worked with multiple partners, but generally on a rotating basis. But they're always looking for new ideas. But the Institute for Contemporary Art has been a partner on that mural, and there's been several others there that.
Well, that gets a lot of visibility because
it does.
It's right out there in front of Dewey Square,
and it's right next to South Station, so there's lots of people going back and forth by it.
And some of the designs evoke a lot of emotions and responses.
Yeah.
And I guess that's what contemporary art.
Yeah.
You want you to do. You want to rethink spaces.
Right. And they're actually painting the next one right now. You can go there today and see them in process, which is exciting.
So tell us about the space. I guess it's the one that is next to the towers.
Right. So it's off to the left there. You can kind of see there's a rectangular section where there's paths that kind of make a curved X in the middle of the park. There's a better image of it. And so...
Okay, do you want me to move forward?
Yeah, do that one. So this was... Janet Eckelman was the artist here, and she has done these aerial fiber-based installations all over the world. After doing the public art planning process, the Greenway decided they wanted to start with a very bold and signature project in the public art program. So worked with Janet and to commission a work, and this one is called...
she's a local artist, you see.
She is. She's based in Brookline.
Yeah.
So it was great because we could both have an artist that was world renowned and had worked in these public spaces, but also of Boston and a local person. And
she's worked not just in America, but in
that's right,
all over the world.
In Europe and in Asia, and one of her projects was in Sydney, Australia. So she's worked all over, and she works a lot very closely with an engineering team because these are very complex structures.
Have a look at that. These cables are crucial,
and those white cables that you see is kind of the base of the structure that then the colorful fibers hang off of. They're all individually wound, and the colors are all unique to the sculpture, and the shape is. This one was called As If It Were Already Here, and Janet typically doesn't name her projects until she sees them, so she wanted to see this installed and then named it. But these white fibers are only about 2 inches in diameter, each of them, but they're engineered to actually be stronger than steel, and they are connected. They had 4 points of connections to buildings next to this part of the park. 2 of them were at the Intercontinental Hotel.
That's the one to the left.
That's right. One of them was at 200 High Street, which is to the right. And the last one, the highest point, was at International Place, where we connected to the 29th floor of the building.
Wow. I think you have some pictures here.
Yes, and so
that's the white robe you're talking about.
That is the white robe, and that's me. We worked also with Shawmut contractors. They were great. We needed a contractor. We were not trying to build a building, we were trying to hang public art, so we needed somebody that could think really creatively about how you do that. And Shawmut was great. Arup and Pat McCafferty's team there was incredible on the engineering front. And a lot of the planning...
It's not something that had been done. I mean, they kind of had to invent a system of suspension of how to attach it to an existing building.
That's right.
The
So
buildings were not made for it.
they were not. They had to adapt and put in attachment points to each of the buildings. So there was a lot of welding going on beforehand, a lot of preparation, but then a lot of the planning, because the Greenway is such a busy part of town and flanked by two very busy streets, we had to install at a time where we could close those streets. We needed 6 cranes and several other pieces of equipment to hoist the sculpture in place. You can see kind of beyond those people there, it just comes in a box that's about, a 6-foot cube. It doesn't come in.
That's it.
That's it.
Oh, it's not a bit, because it's all air.
It's all air. It's a net.
But
so
probably what wasn't all air is, I can imagine you had to do a lot of explaining.
Right. So we had to even select the buildings that we were going to attach to, we had to analyze them and see which structures were strong enough to support the pull of the net, the tension. So we talked with 10 different building owners to start, and they let us analyze their buildings, and then we kind of kept whittling down, and we ended up with 3, and they were part of the process the whole time. We kept them informed of any updates and worked with attorneys and worked with engineers to make sure that they weren't liable if anything went wrong.
I can imagine there was some insurance.
There was some insurance. Not as scary as you might think, but there was certainly some insurance.
Yeah.
And really just keeping them a part of the conversation the entire time was really helpful, and also communicating logistics of the installation day. What time we expected to start, what time we expected to finish, what was going to happen in between, how they were going to get updates. Everybody had my personal cell phone number to call me to find out. And so we started at 2 a.m. The police closed the street on a Saturday night, which was really Sunday morning, and we brought in all these cranes and attached them each to different points on the net that were marked very clearly where they were going to go. And they started to really just kind of lift up the net. I think if you go to the next one, you can see what it looked like at first. And just really start to pick it apart and untangle it. Because as you might imagine, if you put a giant net into a box, it can get a little bit tangled. And so slowly started to hoist it. We also had to be very careful of not catching on trees, because you can imagine a net would want to catch onto a branch, and that would really cause a delay in the timing of the project, and potentially a delay of the road closures. And we worked with the city, we worked with Mass DOT, a lot of different state agencies and city agencies on the coordination, but everybody was very clear that we needed to have the streets back open by Monday morning at 5 a.m. so that business could go on in the city.
That was an interesting weekend.
We had a timer on us, and so I think I was awake for about 40 hours straight.
Yeah, and here, is this a photograph, or is that a drawing that you did in advance?
That's a photograph, and that shows the lighting. We also added lighting components to several of the city street lights so that I could illuminate it and change the color, and it really changed the character of the piece.
Yeah, great. Well, you have a few more images, so we're going to go now to various parts where you did some programming. Tell us about the various programs.
So in my last role at the Greenway Conservancy, I was the director of programs and planning. We combined the planning department with the programming department because they were so intertwined. What I did was oversee the public programs, many of them free. I think when I was there in 2016, there were over 400 free public programs each season. And it started with, the model of the Greenway is to host programming rather than produce it. So we work with partners to do things like farmers markets, like you saw, to do some big events on our own. This was a gala that then also serves as our young professional event, the Glow in the Park, which is coming up for them again.
It definitely glows in here, yes.
It definitely does.
Yeah.
And worked with other partners. I think the next one is the celebrity series, Let's Dance, which was a 5-night dance party on the Greenway.
What an amazing thing.
That's right.
Yeah. And that's happening again, isn't it?
It is happening again. They schedule, I think they have it in a different location now, but we work with the Celebrity Series, which is a great organization, and they schedule not only instructors, they schedule instructors to teach everybody how to do a different type of dance each night, and then they have a dance party after.
Yeah. Well, it's wonderful you have this experience, because now you're going to bring that to the Charles River.
Of course.
And as you know, there are already some programming on the Charles. I I know I think it's this Friday night, May 25th, is a full moon, so there will be tango on
Yes.
the Weeks Bridge. And then for the autumnal equinox, there will be at River Sing with revels at the Weeks Bridge.
Yes.
And the River Festival is coming up
Right.
also on June
Right.
2nd. And then Herder Park, we just
Yeah.
went to the ribbon cutting.
Yeah, Herder Park has opened for another season. They started with one last year, but have, I think, an even bigger program this year with different bands. I know that there's a funk band. I'm planning on going to that one.
Yeah.
They'll have different dance performers and theater groups.
And
all
there's
through the
another
season.
Shakespeare coming up.
Another Shakespeare, that's right.
As you like
What-
it in November.
Right.
Yeah.
So it'll be a great season for them
Yeah.
at Herder Park. I plan to be there.
Good.
Yeah.
So we have a wonderful new talent on the Charles here, and we plan to
Yes.
see many things in the
Yes.
future. So that's really wonderful.
Certainly big shoes to fill, Renata, but
Well, it's great. I mean, Cambridge already has a few wonderful activities, but I think the river could benefit for some more.
yes.
So thank you, Laura, for doing that, and I will have now Laura's contact information.
Yes.
And so if you want to find Laura at
Okay.
the Charles River Conservancy, here you find her, and you find also a description about her background, and so that is very exciting. So, and then if you want information about the Conservancy, here you find our website, and we are now going off the air. Thank you, Laura.
Thank
and
you, Renata.
Great to have you on board.
Thank you.